Marcus Lee adjusted the collar of his stiff historian's uniform, feeling the familiar discomfort as he stared at the looming holographic banners of the Xenthari Empire. Gleaming symbols of conquest and power hung in oppressive brilliance throughout the station's massive hall. The banners served as constant reminders that humanity was conquered, their rich heritage all but erased under the monolithic gaze of their alien overlords. Marcus swallowed his bitterness, dutifully stepping into the expansive chamber where historians like himself labored daily, forced to record and embellish the history of their conquerors. As he approached his workstation, he glanced across the room at dozens of other humans, each focused on rewriting the truth. Once proud scholars and archivists, now reduced to propagandists, mandated to erase humanity's cultural past, replacing it with a sanitized narrative that served Xenthari interests. Yet Marcus retained a small, silent rebellion. Hidden within layers of rewritten histories, he preserved small truths, fragments and echoes of humanity's once glorious past. Marcus sighed and tapped his console, pulling up his day's assignment, cataloging yet another victorious campaign by the Xenthari against rebellious colonies. Each word he wrote would further bury humanity's defiance beneath layers of obedient submission. Each entry extinguished a piece of their collective identity. Today, however, an unusual alert blinked insistently on his screen. Marcus frowned, heart quickening with sudden uncertainty. An official summons from Commander Xelthas, the Xenthari administrator overseeing the historical archives. Summons from Xelthas were rarely good news. Marcus rose, weaving through the maze of silent human workers, sensing their covert glances and worried curiosity. He straightened his back, determined to show no fear or weakness before the Xenthari. He was human, after all. Deep within him, beneath decades of enforced obedience, burned a small flame of dignity. Commander Xelthas awaited him inside an ornate office filled with holograms glorifying Xenthari history. Wars won, planets conquered, cultures subdued. Xelthas was imposing, tall and sleek with translucent violet skin shimmering faintly under artificial light. His deep amber eyes studied Marcus intently, unreadable as always. "You summoned me, Commander?" Marcus asked, careful to keep his voice calm and respectful. Xelthas regarded him for a moment before speaking in the precise, clipped accent of his species. "Historian Lee, we have uncovered something unexpected." He activated a small projector, displaying images of a derelict human spacecraft, drifting silently near the outermost edge of Xenthari-controlled territory. A human vessel dating back centuries before our conquest. It intrigues us. Marcus felt an unbidden shiver of excitement tempered by suspicion. "What do you require from me, Commander?" "Your human knowledge of ancient Earth vessels makes you valuable," Xelthas replied. "Examine it. Report everything you find. Leave nothing concealed." Marcus bowed slightly, hiding his internal reaction. Of course. Hours later, Marcus found himself aboard a sleek Xenthari transport, speeding toward the derelict vessel. As they approached, his breath caught. Floating against the dark backdrop of space was a ship from humanity's golden age, scarred yet intact. Its elongated form a testament to forgotten technologies and aspirations lost to conquest and oppression. When Marcus boarded, accompanied by stern-faced Xenthari soldiers who quickly took positions outside the ancient vessel, he felt an immediate connection. His flashlight illuminated dust-covered walls etched with symbols and writing he recognized as long-lost Earth languages. Carefully, he moved deeper inside, his historian's curiosity warring with caution. He discovered a central chamber, a forgotten command center, pristine despite centuries of abandonment. Activating ancient controls, Marcus nearly jumped as holograms erupted around him, bathing him in ghostly blue light. Images of Earth appeared, pristine oceans, vibrant cities teeming with life and culture. Marcus stared in awe, realizing he was witnessing true human history, uncensored, free from Xenthari corruption. A voice spoke, gentle yet firm. echoing through the forgotten halls. You who find this vessel carry the memory of Earth. Our heritage, our culture, our resistance against oppression must never die. Marcus's heart raced. Before him unfolded humanity's lost stories, civilizations rising and falling, wars fought for freedom, and knowledge suppressed by conquerors. He learned that humanity had once journeyed proudly among the stars, respected, powerful, until the Xenthari systematically dismantled their history and erased their identity. Tears blurred Marcus's vision as he realized the enormity of his discovery. This was forbidden knowledge, dangerous truths. Yet Marcus knew instinctively that he could never hand this information over to Xelthas. As he downloaded the data secretly onto a concealed storage device, Marcus understood what had happened. Fate had chosen him. He had lived his life hiding truths in scraps and fragments, but now he possessed the power to ignite humanity's memory, to resurrect pride and dignity from the ruins of their subjugation. Leaving the ship behind, Marcus carefully masked the true value of his discovery from the suspicious Xenthari soldiers. They could not comprehend the depth of what he'd found, dismissing it as another forgotten relic, harmless to their dominion. But Marcus knew better. He had found a spark that could rekindle humanity's lost spirit. As the transport sped back toward the heart of Xenthari-controlled space, Marcus gazed defiantly at the stars. He vowed silently to share what he'd found, to awaken his people and restore humanity's forgotten strength. For the first time in centuries, hope ignited in the darkness. Marcus returned to his cramped quarters aboard the Xenthari research station, pulse racing as he sealed the door behind him. The tiny storage device weighed heavily in his pocket, a mere sliver of metal containing humanity's lost history, Earth's forgotten culture, and the seeds of rebellion itself. Carefully checking for surveillance, he activated his personal terminal and began decoding the vast trove of recovered information. As data flooded his screen, Marcus saw vibrant images and historical records detailing an Earth he'd never imagined. Vast cities of glass and metal reaching skyward, oceans shimmering with abundant life, and nations defined by rich, varied cultures, languages, and traditions. This was not the primitive, divided humanity the Xenthari histories portrayed. Instead, he glimpsed a civilization that had flourished, prospered, and explored the stars with confidence and purpose. Marcus lingered on footage of humans stepping onto alien worlds, peaceful interactions with other species, and technological breakthroughs that defied imagination. Earth's past was not one of isolated struggle, but vibrant expansion and interstellar cooperation. Humanity had once commanded respect, negotiating alliances and guiding civilizations toward unity and mutual understanding. Tears blurred his vision as Marcus realized how thoroughly the Xenthari had obliterated this proud legacy. Generations of humanity had grown believing themselves inherently weak, culturally primitive, and dependent on Xenthari protection and control. But here, undeniable evidence proved otherwise. Humans were explorers, inventors, diplomats, and above all, resilient survivors. Hours stretched into days as Marcus meticulously explored the archives. He found schematics of lost technologies, including advanced propulsion systems, communications devices that could pierce through oppressive Xenthari censorship, and powerful defense systems that humanity had once utilized to safeguard their worlds. Each blueprint held transformative potential, offering humanity practical means of resistance if they could somehow reclaim these long-suppressed capabilities. Yet most compelling of all were the countless artifacts that spoke directly to Marcus's historian heart, collections of human music, literature, philosophies, and mythologies. Marcus immersed himself deeply, astonished by the diversity and depth of humanity's cultural heritage. Forgotten songs and stories stirred him profoundly, reconnecting him to an ancestral identity he hadn't realized he'd been missing. The more he learned, the deeper his resolve grew. He had to share this truth with others. He had to break humanity's chains of ignorance. But doing so carried immense danger. Marcus knew the Xenthari monitored everything. Trusting the wrong individual could lead not only to his execution, but also to the permanent destruction of this priceless knowledge. Marcus needed allies, trustworthy individuals willing to risk everything to resurrect humanity's stolen legacy. His first choice was Talia Reyes, a fellow historian working quietly in a distant station sector. Like Marcus, Talia was cautious but curious, known for her compassion and quiet defiance. Risking a message carefully disguised in historical code, Marcus summoned her discreetly to his quarters. When Talia arrived, Marcus silently led her to his terminal, heart pounding as he activated the ancient footage of Earth civilizations at their peak. Talia stared, mouth agape, as the forgotten images unfolded before her, illuminating her features with wonder, awe, and finally, determination. "Is this real?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with shock and barely restrained hope. Marcus nodded solemnly. "Everything we've known about ourselves, Talia, has been a lie carefully constructed to ensure our submission. But this," he gestured passionately at the archives, "this is our truth, the heritage the Xenthari stole from us. They fear our past because it reveals the strength we once had. It shows that humanity is capable of far more than servitude." Talia's eyes hardened with newfound resolve. "We can't keep this hidden, Marcus. Every human deserves to know." Marcus took a steadying breath, recognizing the dangerous path they'd chosen. "Agreed, but it must be done carefully. The Xenthari will crush us if they discover this prematurely." Together, they devised a plan. Marcus and Talia would slowly and methodically distribute bits of Earth's history, carefully hidden in coded messages disguised as mundane historical research. Their strategy was subtle. Human culture, songs, poems, and historical accounts quietly disseminated among trusted historians and archivists across colonies and workstations. Each message was crafted to rekindle dormant pride and dignity, fostering curiosity, hope, and defiance. Weeks passed, and Marcus watched with cautious optimism as the first whisper spread. Humans began subtly acknowledging their shared history, sharing secret glances of recognition in darkened corridors and hidden chambers. Songs thought forgotten began to echo quietly in workers' quarters. Hopeful murmurs spread in the shadows of the Xenthari Empire, signaling the tentative rebirth of humanity's collective spirit. Yet Marcus knew more was needed. Humanity required physical proof, concrete technology to demonstrate their capability to challenge the hegemony's dominion. Thus, he began secretly reconstructing some of the ancient schematics hidden within the archives. Each night, Marcus spent sleepless hours laboring in secrecy, carefully assembling forgotten technology, devices capable of bypassing Xenthari surveillance and communication jammers, small energy shields to protect rebels, and encrypted data caches to share crucial information freely among colonies. The risks were immense, yet Marcus was relentless. Every moment spent rebuilding humanity's technological legacy deepened his commitment to liberation. He could feel the oppressive veil of Xenthari control beginning to tear, each rediscovered fragment of culture and technology another small step toward freedom. Marcus and Talia soon realized they needed help beyond historians. Engineers, soldiers, entertainers, ordinary men and women whose quiet suffering could become fierce defiance. Humanity's liberation required a coordinated interstellar movement, uniting scattered colonies and stations in common purpose. But that meant greater exposure, more significant risks. Marcus stared thoughtfully at Earth's glowing images on his terminal, knowing the next step was inevitable and dangerous. If humanity was to survive, Marcus would have to ignite rebellion openly, placing himself at the center of the storm. This was no longer mere historical preservation, it was revolution. Quietly, Marcus accepted his destiny, prepared to lead humanity from the darkness and back into the stars. Marcus stood before the dimly lit chamber, hidden deep within the underbelly of one of humanity's industrial colonies, feeling the eyes of dozens of cautious yet hopeful faces fixed upon him. He sensed their tension, their quiet desperation, and the cautious anticipation of something that, until recently, they'd considered impossible: freedom. He had traveled secretly from colony to colony, meeting with leaders, scholars, and ordinary people, carefully testing their loyalty and courage. Now, this was his greatest gathering yet. Laborers from factories, soldiers who'd long since grown disillusioned with their oppressive commanders, and entertainers forced to amuse their Xenthari masters. They had come quietly, risking everything to hear Marcus Lee speak the truth about their lost heritage. "We have been lied to," Marcus began softly, his voice echoing with conviction. "Our conquerors want us to believe we're insignificant, mere tools to serve their empire. They erase our history, suppress our culture, and dictate our very identity. They do this because they're terrified of us. They're terrified of who we once were, and of who we can become again." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, whispers of agreement mixed with quiet uncertainty. Marcus took a steadying breath and raised a small holographic projector, activating an ancient video clip. Earth's beauty appeared, majestic cities rising alongside green hills, proud faces of humanity filled with dignity and strength. The room fell silent, captivated by the forgotten images. "This," Marcus declared, pointing emphatically at the glowing hologram, "is who we truly are: free, powerful, dignified. We once stood proudly among the stars, respected, not enslaved. This is our legacy, and we must reclaim it." From the crowd stepped forward a weary soldier, battle-scarred and hardened by a lifetime of enforced loyalty to his oppressors. But how? They hold all the power. They control the weapons, the ships, the colonies. How can we challenge the Xenthari? Marcus smiled knowingly. They control us only through fear and ignorance. But knowledge, true knowledge, can break that power. Marcus carefully unveiled a device he had reconstructed from Earth's ancient archives, a powerful communicator shielded from Xenthari surveillance. "With this, we can speak freely, coordinate our actions, and spread hope to every human scattered among the stars." The soldier reached out, cautiously touching the device as though fearing it might vanish. "This can truly break through their control." Marcus nodded firmly. "It's just the beginning. Our ancestors once built devices far greater. I've uncovered technologies we can rebuild together: shields, weapons, engines powerful enough to challenge the Xenthari fleet. But our most potent weapon is the strength of our unity and shared purpose." One by one, the faces in the room shifted from fear to determination, uncertainty turning to resolve. Laborers whispered among themselves. Soldiers exchanged looks of newfound confidence. Entertainers began to nod in quiet affirmation. The first real seeds of organized rebellion were planted here, in secret rooms across countless colonies. Marcus knew their survival depended on immediate, tangible victories to sustain morale. Coordinating secretly, his growing network planned strategic actions across multiple Xenthari-controlled outposts. In the mining colonies, humans subtly sabotaged operations, slowing production without revealing their involvement. Soldiers quietly redirected shipments of weapons and supplies, stockpiling resources for future rebellion. Entertainers cleverly disguised forbidden Earth songs and poetry within performances, inspiring crowds without alerting Xenthari censors. Within weeks, the Xenthari sensed something changing in their human subjects. Yet the subtlety of the rebels' actions left their oppressors confused and wary, unable to pinpoint the source of disruption. Still, Marcus understood the next stage required escalation, an unmistakable demonstration of humanity's strength and unity. With the hidden communicator systems now in place, Marcus transmitted a coordinated message to all human colonies simultaneously. His face, filled with resolve and courage, appeared secretly in homes, factories, and military installations across occupied space. "Today, we reclaim who we are," Marcus declared defiantly. "We are no longer isolated, powerless, or afraid. Together, we defy our oppressors. Together, we rise." The impact was immediate. Rebellion sparked across the Xenthari Empire. Factory workers refused their tasks en masse. Soldiers openly defied their commanders. Entertainers stopped performing for alien amusement, instead singing banned human songs. For the first time in centuries, humanity openly defied their conquerors, reclaiming dignity and asserting their right to freedom. Marcus felt both pride and anxiety as reports reached him from across dozens of colonies. Humanity was waking from its long, oppressed slumber, ready to confront the Xenthari openly. Yet he knew retaliation would be swift and merciless. They would have to endure brutal reprisals, knowing their oppressors would seek to extinguish rebellion quickly and completely. Marcus gathered his closest allies, strategists like Talia, and soldiers hardened by a lifetime of enforced obedience, now eager for freedom. Together, they quickly prepared defensive measures based on Earth's rediscovered technologies, constructing improvised energy shields and weaponry designed to counter Xenthari forces. They encouraged each colony to stand united, aware that survival depended entirely upon cooperation and solidarity. As the Xenthari prepared their ruthless response, humanity stood firm, inspired by Marcus's bravery and leadership. The historian who once hid his defiance in careful writings now openly challenged the Empire, becoming the face of humanity's struggle for liberation. He embraced this role without hesitation, knowing it was necessary to inspire hope and maintain unity. On the eve of battle, Marcus looked out at the gathered rebels. Laborers, soldiers, scholars, entertainers, faces resolute, eyes filled with determination. Humanity had risen. They would face the Xenthari head-on, determined to reclaim their destiny or perish in the attempt. Marcus knew there would be no turning back. They had ignited the flames of revolution, and nothing could extinguish them now. Whatever came next, humanity was prepared to fight. The Xenthari struck back faster than Marcus had expected. Across multiple colonies, black-armored enforcer squadrons descended without warning. Known as the Hfy, translated loosely as the Hand of Obedience, these elite forces executed swift purges. Suspected rebels were arrested or killed, settlements were locked down, and comms networks were flooded with propaganda designed to sow doubt and reassert control. But something had changed. In the past, these tactics would have shattered morale. Humans would have gone quiet, slipped back into submission, and hoped to avoid notice. Not now. Not anymore. Marcus stood in the control chamber of a reclaimed asteroid mining station, one of the first to declare open rebellion. Around him, a ragtag team of engineers, scientists, and former soldiers coordinated an expanding resistance network. They wore no uniforms. Their gear was scavenged, their tech barely held together with spare parts and hope, but they were united. The Hfy just hit Sector 9. No survivors, Talia said grimly, stepping into the chamber, her face pale under the flickering lights. Marcus clenched his jaw. Did the transmission get out? Talia nodded. Right before they breached. Full footage. Every death will fuel the fire. Marcus turned back to the table-sized holomap showing their growing network of active human cells. Red-marked colonies under siege, green-marked strongholds, yellow for those in the balance. There were more green dots now than a week ago. But numbers alone wouldn't win this war. What Marcus needed, what humanity needed, was a symbol. Not just a historian-turned-rebel leader, not just stolen tech or inspirational messages, but something bigger, a vision for a future no one could ignore. And allies. The Xenthari had oppressed more than just humans. Their empire spanned hundreds of systems, dozens of intelligent species, each subjugated in different ways. Some had long since been broken. Others remained silent out of fear. But a few still harbored resentment. Marcus was sure of it. It was time to reach out. The Xenthari were first. Amphibious beings with translucent skin and wide, luminous eyes, their homeworld had been stripped of resources a generation ago. Now they lived as slaves in underwater mining outposts. Marcus sent envoys bearing messages not of dominance or shared conquest, but of solidarity. We were all made to forget who we are, his message said. But together, we can remember and rise. At first, there was no response. Days passed. Then, at an obscure outpost in the Darren Belt, a Xenthari ship exploded mid-dock, and every Xelari miner aboard escaped. A single message followed. We remember. Next came the Vranari, nomadic avian beings with razor-sharp intellects and a proud warrior heritage. The Xenthari had shattered their fleets centuries ago and forced their survivors into menial jobs aboard luxury vessels and trading hubs. But old pride lingered. Marcus broadcast fragments of human poetry, translated into Vranari tongue, about lost glory, exile, and the sky calling them home. When a Xenthari warship vanished near a gas giant in Vranari space, a pirate-like signal was traced back to a band of rebel Vranari, calling themselves the Winged Ember. A single word followed Marcus's encrypted outreach: flight. The fire spread. Now, not only humans, but Xelari, Vranari, and others began striking out, banding together in secret enclaves, pooling knowledge and resources. It was chaos, but purposeful chaos, the kind that could topple empires. Marcus's rebellion evolved into a movement. His communications team, once a handful of historians and technicians, now coordinated thousands. They built an encrypted relay network using scavenged satellites and black market alien tech. Where the Xenthari clamped down on one colony, 5 more erupted in defiance. But with growth came conflict. Inside the human rebellion itself, ideological rifts appeared. Some cells advocated for vengeance, total war, no mercy. Others, particularly those now working closely with alien allies, pushed for cooperation and restraint. One night, inside the dim light of a repurposed cargo bay, Marcus met with his inner circle. Talia leaned forward, voice tight. The Rysel faction wants to start bombing Xenthari civilian transports. They say it's justice. And what do you say? Marcus asked. I say it's not who we are, she replied. But they're angry. We all are. He looked around at the others. Grizzled fighters, engineers, even a former Xenthari translator who had defected and now taught capture documents to rebel commanders. The line we draw now, Marcus said slowly, will define what we become. If we act like them, we may win the war, but we'll lose everything else. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of leadership. But the nods that came, one by one, told Marcus that they understood. They weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting to be better. The turning point came at Hecker Station. Once a major Xenthari trading hub, Hecker's human population had lived under brutal control for generations. Marcus coordinated a joint strike. Human rebels, Vranari strike wings, and Xelari saboteurs, on one of the largest Xenthari communications nexuses in the sector. It was a bloodbath, but they won. The footage of the Xenthari banner being torn down by a human and a Vranari fighter, raising instead a crude but unmistakable symbol of unity, a circle of interlocking species around an ancient Earth symbol for freedom, went viral across the underground network. It was no longer just Marcus's rebellion. It was a coalition, a reckoning. He stood in the command center days later, staring at the updated map. The green was spreading fast, faster than the Xenthari could react. They're scared, Talia whispered. They should be, Marcus replied. Because we've only just begun. The fire had caught. Now, the galaxy burned with the promise of change. And Marcus Lee, once a quiet historian forced to rewrite lies, was now the spark that would either liberate the stars or engulf them in war. The stars were no longer silent. Every day, another transmission crackled through the rebellion's encrypted network. A mining colony liberated, a freighter seized, a Xenthari garrison overwhelmed. Marcus Lee stood at the heart of it all, coordinating chaos, forging alliances, and watching the storm he'd helped unleash grow beyond anything he'd imagined. But victory wasn't inevitable. The hegemony was vast, and now it was angry. From deep within their core systems, the Xenthari deployed their most terrifying weapon, the Varkas fleet, an armada of AI-enhanced dreadnoughts commanded by High Strategos Vornak, an old warrior who had crushed rebellions before Marcus was born. The Varkas had only been used twice in history. Each time, they left nothing behind. The rebellion's brief momentum risked being shattered. Marcus knew the next moves had to be precise, coordinated, and bold enough to survive the storm bearing down on them. And it all began with Andros Prime. Andros Prime had once been a human colony, renowned for its beauty and rich mineral deposits. After the conquest, the Xenthari turned it into a prison industrial complex, entire cities converted into forced labor camps. Rumors whispered that beneath the surface, an ancient human vault had been discovered, something the Xenthari had kept hidden, even from their own people. The rebellion needed it, not just for its potential strategic value, but for what it represented, a symbolic reclamation of a world humanity had lost. We hit Andros, Marcus told the War Council, gathered around the central table aboard the Rebel Command ship Resolve. The room fell silent. "You're insane," muttered Reth Kalnor, a Vranari tactician with talon-tipped fingers drumming the table. "The Varkas are heading in that direction. If they get there before we finish the assault." "They won't," Marcus replied, "because we won't be there to finish the assault." He tapped a command, bringing up a complex battle simulation. "We're going to fake an invasion, make it look like we're throwing everything at Andros. But the real strike will happen here." The map zoomed out, shifting to a nearby system, Kelmari Drift, home to a key Xenthari logistics hub. "We hit their fuel lines," said Talia, catching on. "Without supplies, the Varkas fleet crawls. We buy time for the real Andros team to strike from within." Marcus nodded. "We're not going to outgun them. We have to outthink them." The plan unfolded like a symphony of risk. Human and alien pilots led feint attacks toward Andros, engaging patrols and broadcasting false fleet coordinates. Meanwhile, a stealth squadron led by Captain Juno Wren, a former smuggler turned rebel hero, slipped into Kelmari space, destroying key depots and triggering a cascading supply chain collapse. At the same time, a separate infiltration team, handpicked by Marcus, descended into Andros via its underground aquifers. Among them, Talia, 2 ex-military engineers, and a Zalari operative named Hfy, whose ability to breathe in low-oxygen tunnels made her vital. Their objective: seize control of the rumored vault and disable the prison's security grid from within. Hours stretched into silence. Marcus monitored the operation from the Resolve, tension gripping every breath. Then, finally, Talia's voice crackled through. "We're in. You won't believe what's down here." The vault was real, and it was staggering. Deep below Andros, the Xenthari had buried a massive pre-conquest human archive. Not just data, prototypes, military-grade ships, an entire hangar of unused, cryo-sealed tech hidden since the first days of the occupation. The Xenthari hadn't destroyed it, likely too intrigued or too afraid of triggering unknown failsafes. Until now, it had slept. Now it woke. By the time Vornak's fleet arrived at Andros, they found chaos. Their supply routes severed, their communications jammed, and the prison facility already ablaze with rebellion. Dozens of prototype human ships, patched together by rebel engineers, roared into space with makeshift armaments and reverse-engineered cloaking systems. The Varkas flagship Dominion's Eye attempted to restore control until Juno Wren's stealth team planted explosives along its hull and detonated them with a signature flourish, the sound of an ancient Earth anthem blaring across every Xenthari comms channel. The Xenthari fleet withdrew. It was the rebellion's first major military victory against a full Xenthari armada. But not all was triumphant. In the aftermath of Andros, Marcus faced a new problem: success. Rebel factions were growing bolder, more independent. Some saw Andros as justification to strike harder with fewer restraints. There were reports of civilian Xenthari casualties, retaliations, power struggles. In a secluded chamber aboard the Resolve, Marcus met with his closest advisors. Talia leaned against the wall, eyes tired but sharp. Hfy sat in meditative silence, while Reth paced impatiently. "The alliance is fracturing," Hfy said at last, her voice soft but firm. "Too many agendas. You gave them a cause. Now they each want to define it." Reth hissed. "What did you expect? We've all lost something. Everyone wants their justice." Marcus looked down at the table, at a bloody datapad from a rebel cell that had gone too far, targeting Xenthari civilians in retaliation for a massacre. He felt the weight of every choice. He had unleashed something unstoppable. This was never about revenge, he said. It was about building something new, something better. Then we have to lead by example, Talia said. Now, before this turns into just another war for power. In the following days, Marcus delivered a message across all rebel channels. A speech, not as a general, but as a historian. I will not ask you to fight for hate, he said, standing before the cameras with Earth's restored flag behind him. We are not the Xenthari. We're not conquerors. If we win by becoming them, then we lose everything we've reclaimed. This fight is for dignity, for memory, for the right to define ourselves, not through domination, but through unity, through peace. We can be better. We must be. The message resonated across species. It didn't stop the war, but it drew a line in the sand. More rebel factions pledged to uphold these principles. Others broke away, radicalized, becoming their own threat. Marcus would deal with them later. For now, the movement held. The storm had come, and humanity had weathered it, not by matching their enemies' cruelty, but by remembering who they were. As Marcus looked out at the stars, now lit by the fires of rebellion and the hope of something new, he knew the final confrontation was coming. But it wouldn't be just a battle for territory. It would be a battle for the soul of everything they'd built. The war had reached its apex. Across the galaxy, rebellion had ceased to be a scattered spark. Now it was a roaring blaze, unstoppable and alive. Xenthari systems fell one by one, not to brute force alone, but to a vision, an idea of freedom that transcended species and banners. The Reclamation, as it had come to be called, had grown far beyond Marcus Lee's original circle of historians and fugitives. But with every victory came a new fracture. And now, as Marcus stood aboard the bridge of the Resolve, staring into the swirling depths of hyperspace, he knew the final choice ahead was not just about winning the war. It was about what came after. Behind him, the command deck buzzed with quiet tension. Reports from across rebel sectors showed everything converging on one system. Carthel, the administrative heart of the Xenthari Hegemony. Carthel wasn't just the political capital, it was symbolic. The system housed the Hegemon's palace, the seat of law, and the Crucible, a massive AI databank where centuries of Xenthari governance protocols were stored. Whoever controlled Carthel controlled the galaxy's future. It would be the last stand, one way or another. Talia stepped beside Marcus, arms crossed tightly. All coalition forces are in position. Vranari wings are running recon. The Zalari have confirmed their infiltration teams are beneath the city grid. And the Arkari elders, surprisingly, have pledged spiritual protection to those who fall. Marcus glanced at her. That's oddly poetic. Yeah, they said you inspire them. You should be worried. He smiled, tired. I am. Before the assault, Marcus called a final council. Representatives of every major rebel faction gathered virtually in a secure hollow chamber. I won't lie to you, he began, looking at each face. Feathered Vranari warriors, crystalline-bodied Carthan monks, weary human commanders, Zalari with their luminous, unreadable expressions. Tomorrow, we strike Carthel. The hegemony will throw everything they have at us. We may not all live to see the end. Silence followed. Everyone knew this. What matters most isn't whether we win. It's what we choose to become if we do. We have a chance, not just to topple an empire, but to replace it with something better. Something fair. Not a new master. A new way. A grizzled human commander named Duval leaned forward. You're still talking about diplomacy? After all the blood they've spilled. I'm talking about not becoming them, Marcus said. Not repeating the cycle. We didn't fight this hard just to sit on a new throne. Some nodded. Others didn't. But none argued. The assault on Carthel began with silence. Using stealth arrays and borrowed cloaking tech, rebel ships entered the system undercover. While capital ships engaged the Xenthari fleet head-on in orbit, resistance teams spread across the surface, disabling shield arrays, hacking communication nodes, and freeing internment camps near the city core. Marcus himself led a small strike team directly into the Crucible. The databank held not just the protocols of governance, but information, dossiers on every species under the hegemony's rule, technology suppressed, cultural histories censored or erased. It was the very heart of control. Talia, Citron, and a rotating team of engineers and commandos fought room by room, data vault by data vault, until they reached the core. There, standing before the access terminal, was High Strategos Vornak. He was waiting. The old Xenthari's violet skin shimmered in the low light, his amber eyes fixed on Marcus with something between contempt and curiosity. "I wondered if it would be you," Vornak said, unarmed. "The historian. I've stopped calling myself that," Marcus replied, stepping forward. "Pity. Historians make the best tyrants. They know which stories to erase." "I'm not here to erase," Marcus said. "I'm here to restore." Vornak tilted his head. "And when you win, because you will win, what then? You think peace lasts? Power always creates hunger. Your coalition will fracture. Humans will rise as rulers. It's inevitable." Talia raised her weapon. "Shut him up, Marcus. We don't need to hear this." But Marcus didn't. "Not yet. This is the moment," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "This is what I've been afraid of since the beginning." He walked to the control console, its interface ancient and alien. The Crucible could be destroyed, wiping centuries of Xenthari power in an instant. Or reprogrammed, repurposed. The temptation was immense. With a single order, Marcus could place humanity in charge of the galaxy. And why not? They'd suffered, fought, survived. Didn't they deserve justice? Control? But then he remembered the voice in the ancient human vessel that started it all. Our resistance must never become oppression. Marcus looked at Vornak, then at his allies. And he did something no Xenthari had ever expected. He broadcast the Crucible's contents, all of it, to the entire galaxy. Secrets, war crimes, censored histories, forbidden tech, names of oppressors, names of victims, all sent in one unfiltered stream. Not to be used by a new ruler, but to expose everything. Let every species see. Let truth, not domination, guide what came next. The Crucible's servers melted under the strain. Vornak lunged, furious, but Talia brought him down with a single shot. She looked at Marcus, stunned. "You gave it all away." Marcus nodded slowly. "It was never ours to keep." In the days that followed, the hegemony collapsed like a dying star. The Xenthari elite fled or surrendered. Rebel forces dismantled the structures of oppression piece by piece. Species long divided began talks, real talks, about what came next. Some rebel leaders demanded a human-led council. Others argued for shared governance. There were disagreements, threats, even brief skirmishes. But they talked, because now everyone had seen the truth. And truth could not be conquered. Marcus withdrew from leadership. He had never wanted power. He returned to the resolve. Watching from orbit as representatives of a dozen species began the first session of what would become the Galactic Concord. Talia found him there, leaning against the viewport. "They're going to name this day after you, you know," she said with a smirk. "I hope not," Marcus replied. "Names turn into statues. Statues turn into dogma. Let them remember the idea. Not me." She smiled, still a historian at heart. He nodded, watching a blue and green world rise over Carthel's horizon. "No," he said quietly, "just a human." Finally, the war was over, but the struggle had only begun. In the weeks following the fall of the Xenthari Hegemony, the galaxy held its breath. After centuries of dominance, the Empire's architecture had crumbled faster than anyone imagined. Rebel forces, once fugitives and freedom fighters, now found themselves standing amid the ruins of what had been, tasked with answering the question that had haunted Marcus Lee since the beginning. What comes after the revolution? Marcus stood before the newly formed Galactic Concord Assembly, a coalition of over 30 species, each with its own scars from the Xenthari regime. The assembly met in a neutral zone orbiting a gas giant named Virides, aboard a massive, ring station constructed almost overnight by combined alien engineering. The station had no throne, no single seat of power by design. The chamber was circular, Everyone sat level with everyone else. The message was clear: no more emperors. Marcus, though no longer a military commander or even a formal leader, had been invited to speak, not as a symbol, but as a voice of caution and hope. He looked out over the representatives. Some watched with admiration, others with skepticism. Many were tired. All were uncertain. "I was once a historian forced to write lies," he began. "Then I became a rebel, risking everything to unearth the truth. And now I stand here, not as a ruler, but as a witness. You all know what we fought against. The question now is, were we building in its place?" Silence hung in the chamber, thick and necessary. "We have the power now," Marcus continued. "But if we use it to elevate ourselves over others, then we have become what we swore to destroy. If we let fear guide us, fear of another Xenthari, fear of difference, then we are still in chains, only of our own making." He paused, scanning the faces around him. "I don't believe in perfect systems, but I do believe in choices. We must choose transparency. We must choose dialogue. We must choose to listen, even when it's hard, especially then. Our past was silenced. Let our future be one of voices." He stepped back from the podium, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Then, the Xenthari emissary who had once crawled through waterlogged tunnels to help free Anderos Prime stood. "The Concord must not only represent those who fought," she said, her voice calm and measured. "It must represent those who were silenced, the ones who didn't live to see this day. If we are to build something worthy, we must honor them with justice, not revenge." One by one, others followed. Not speeches, simple statements, commitments. The Carthan offered to share energy technology once hoarded by the Xenthari. The Vrunari proposed rotating leadership to avoid concentration of power. Even a few Xenthari dissidents, young, radical thinkers who had turned against their elders, spoke of reparations and reform. The Galactic Concord Charter was drafted over the next several months. It was imperfect, messy, full of contradictions, but it was real. It recognized species autonomy, outlawed forced servitude, and enshrined access to history, art, and truth as universal rights. It also prohibited centralized militaries, instead authorizing peace bands, interstellar coalitions drawn from multiple species to respond to crises collaboratively. For the first time in galactic history, war was not the default language of disagreement. Marcus stepped away from public life. He refused all offers of titles, positions, or monuments. Instead, he returned to what he loved most: teaching. Aboard the Aurora Vault, a traveling vessel retrofitted into a living archive and educational ship, Marcus began sharing the stories of Earth, not just its wars and tragedies, but its art, its music, its absurdities and miracles. He traveled from world to world, helping others tell their stories, too. Talia remained close, now a liaison between newly freed colonies and the Concord Assembly. She carried Marcus's values forward, pragmatic, sharp, and unwavering in her belief that ideals meant nothing without action. One day, as the Aurora Vault drifted through the silver-blue mists of the Iron Nebula, Marcus stood before a group of young students, humans, Xenthari, Vrunari, even a Xenthari child whose parents had defected during the final months of the war. They sat cross-legged in the observation dome, wide-eyed as Marcus spoke. "There was a time," he said, "when people believed history was written by the victors. But they were wrong. History is written by the courageous, by those who refuse to forget, by those who ask hard questions and demand real answers." He paused, letting the stars shimmer around them. "You are not the children of conquest," he said. "You are the children of memory. And memory is a revolution that never ends." The children clapped, not out of obligation but wonder. Somewhere far beyond the nebula, the Concord Assembly was no doubt arguing again, about trade routes, border disputes, cultural misunderstandings. Marcus welcomed it. Better arguments than silence. Better conflict over how to be just than submission to injustice. As the Aurora Vault moved on through the stars, Marcus sat alone in the observation deck, sipping a cup of strong tea, Earth-style. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, well-worn data chip, the one he'd recovered from that ancient Earth vessel all those years ago. He inserted it into the console. Music played, soft, human, achingly old. A voice whispered, "You who find this vessel carry the memory of Earth." Marcus smiled, eyes glistening, and the ship sailed on, into a galaxy no longer ruled by fear, but by choice.